The distant wail of a train whistle carried across the vast Wyoming prairie as Lillian Taylor stood at the edge of Cheyenne, her memories as scattered as the autumn leaves swirling around her feet. The year was 1879, and the frontier town bustled with activity, oblivious to the woman whose past had slipped through her fingers like desert sand. Lillian clutched her worn leather satchel, her knuckles white against the faded material. At 28, she had traveled nearly 1,000 miles west, following the trail of fragmented memories, a melody that haunted her dreams, a life she couldn't quite remember, and the promise of answers in this dusty frontier town. "Miss, you can't stand there all day," a gruff voice called out. "Stage needs to get through." She stepped aside, offering a polite nod to the driver as the coach rumbled past. Cheyenne wasn't what she had expected. Railroad tracks cut through the heart of the settlement, with solid brick buildings lining the main street instead of the ramshackle wooden structures she'd anticipated. Progress had reached the frontier faster than the stories back east suggested. The wind picked up, sending her chestnut hair flying from beneath her bonnet. Lillian tucked the loose strands behind her ear and adjusted her travel-worn dress before making her way toward the center of town. The letter in her pocket, her only connection to this place, felt heavy against her hip. The Prairie Rose Hotel should be suitable for a lady traveling alone, the ticket agent had told her back in Chicago. Respectable establishment, run by a widow who doesn't tolerate nonsense. Lillian spotted the 3-story building with its freshly painted sign and clean windows. Inside, a stern-faced woman with gray-streaked hair looked up from her ledger. "I require a room," Lillian said, setting her satchel down. "I'm not certain for how long." The proprietress, Mrs. Holloway, according to the nameplate on the desk, assessed Lillian with sharp eyes. $3 a week, paid in advance. Includes breakfast and dinner. No gentlemen callers in the rooms, no excessive noise, and no returning after 9 in the evening without prior arrangement. That sounds acceptable. After settling in her modest but clean room on the second floor, Lillian unpacked her few belongings. From a hidden pocket in her satchel, she carefully extracted a folded piece of paper, the letter that had brought her to Cheyenne. The ink had faded in places, but the message remained clear. If you wish to learn the truth about your past, come to Cheyenne, Wyoming territory. Ask for the man who sings the old songs at the Silver Dollar Saloon. No signature. Just a mysterious summons that had arrived 3 months earlier at the Chicago boarding house, where she'd lived and worked as a seamstress for the past 5 years, as long as her memories went back. The doctors had called it trauma-induced amnesia, after she'd been found unconscious by the roadside outside of Chicago in 1874. She remembered nothing before waking in that hospital bed, her identity a blank slate save for her name. Over time, she had built a quiet life, but the nagging emptiness and the recurring dream of a haunting melody she could never quite recall upon waking drove her to respond to the mysterious letter. After washing the travel dust from her face, Lillian changed into her one good dress, a deep blue cotton with minimal embellishment, and made her way downstairs. "Mrs. Holloway, could you direct me to the Silver Dollar Saloon?" she asked. The older woman's eyebrows shot up. "That's hardly a place for a respectable lady, Miss Taylor." "Nevertheless, I have business there." Mrs. Holloway frowned. 2 blocks south, then west on Railroad Street, but I'd advise you to wait until early evening when the Cowboys are still sober enough to remember their manners." Lillian nodded her thanks and returned to her room. She pulled out the small notebook she carried and jotted down her thoughts, as she had done daily since awakening in that Chicago hospital. The doctors had suggested the practice might help trigger her memories. The afternoon passed slowly. As the sun began its descent, Lillian steeled her courage and set out for the saloon. Cheyenne's streets remained busy with commerce even as dusk approached. She walked briskly, ignoring the curious glances from passers-by, a woman alone, clearly not local, heading toward the rowdier part of town. The Silver Dollar announced itself with piano music and raucous laughter spilling into the street. Lillian hesitated at the swinging doors, then squared her shoulders and stepped inside. The piano player faltered briefly at the sight of her before resuming his lively tune. Several heads turned, conversations pausing momentarily before resuming with renewed vigor and speculation. She approached the bar, where a heavy-set man with impressive mustaches wiped glasses with a questionable cloth. "I'm looking for someone," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The man who sings the old songs." The bartender eyed her curiously. "That'd be Adam Hayes. He ain't in tonight, has a small ranch about 5 miles north of town, comes in most Saturdays to play for drinks and tips." Disappointment settled in her chest. "I see. Is there a way to send him a message? He'll be bringing cattle to the stockyards tomorrow morning. You could catch him there if it's important." Lillian nodded her thanks and turned to leave, conscious of the speculative gazes following her. Outside, she drew a deep breath of the cool evening air, trying to quell her frustration. So close to answers, yet still out of reach, the next morning dawned crisp and clear. Lillian rose early, donned her practical traveling outfit, and followed Mrs. Holloway's grudgingly given directions to the stockyards. The smell hit her first: manure, dust, and livestock, followed by the cacophony of bellowing cattle, shouting drovers, and the clatter of hooves against wooden enclosures. She asked a young boy lugging water buckets where she might find Adam Hayes, and he pointed toward a corral at the far end of the yards. Approaching cautiously, she spotted a tall figure directing the movement of a small herd of cattle through a gate. His hat was pulled low, shadowing his face, but even from a distance, she could see he moved with the ease of a man comfortable in his own skin. He called out instructions in a deep, carrying voice that stirred something in the recesses of Lillian's mind. She waited until the last of the cattle had passed through before approaching. "Mr. Hayes," he turned, pushing his hat back to reveal a sun-weathered face, strong features, and eyes the color of a summer storm. For an instant, those eyes widened with what looked like recognition before his expression settled into cautious neutrality. "That's me," he said, removing his gloves and stepping closer. "Something I can help you with, madam." Up close, she could see he was perhaps in his early 30s, with laugh lines around his eyes and a small scar near his left temple partially hidden by dark blonde hair. "My name is Lillian Taylor. I received a letter directing me to find the man who sings the old songs at the Silver Dollar." The bartender said that would be you. Adam Hayes studied her face intently, as if searching for something. "Can't say I've sent any such letter. Who's it from?" "That's just it. There was no name, but it promised information about my past." She hesitated, then decided directness was her best approach. "I have no memories from before 5 years ago, Mr. Hayes. An accident, the doctors said." A complicated expression crossed his face: surprise, concern, and something deeper she couldn't identify. "I'm sorry to hear that, Miss Taylor. But I'm afraid I can't help you. I don't recall our paths ever crossing before." Disappointment flooded through her, but something in his tone, a slight hesitation, caught her attention. "The letter specifically mentioned old songs. The bartender says you're known for them." "Just trail songs and ballads from back east. Nothing special." He gestured toward a nearby water trough. "Would you like some water? It's getting warm already." The sudden change of subject felt deliberate, but Lillian nodded and followed him. As they walked, she noticed his slight limp, the way he favored his right leg. "Were you injured in the war, Mr. Hayes?" The question came unbidden. He glanced at her sharply. "Yes, Gettysburg took a Confederate bullet. How did you know?" She frowned. "I don't know, it just seemed familiar somehow." They reached the water pump and he worked the handle, filling a tin cup for her. As he handed it over, their fingers brushed, and Lillian felt a jolt of something, not recognition exactly, but a sense of déjà vu that left her momentarily dizzy. "Are you all right?" he asked, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. "Yes, it's nothing, thank you for the water." She sipped slowly, gathering her thoughts. "Mr. Hayes, I've traveled a very long way based on this letter. If you know anything at all about why someone would direct me to you, I would be grateful." Adam's gaze shifted beyond her to the busy stockyard. "Miss Taylor, Cheyenne's a crossroads sort of town. People passing through, starting over, leaving troubles behind. Could be someone heard me singing and made a connection you don't recall. Perhaps." She wasn't convinced. "The letter mentioned the truth about my past. That suggests the sender knows what happened to me." Adam was quiet for a long moment. "I'll be at the Silver Dollar tomorrow evening. Come by around 8. I can't promise anything, but maybe one of my songs will stir something for you." It wasn't the answer she'd hoped for, but it was something. "Thank you, I'll be there." He tipped his hat and turned back to his work, leaving Lillian to find her way out of the stockyards, her mind swirling with questions. There had been something in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, perhaps that made her certain he knew more than he was saying. Back at the hotel, she wrote in her journal, detailing her impression of Adam Hayes and the strange familiarity she'd felt in his presence. For the remainder of the day, she explored Cheyenne, visiting shops and observing the blend of frontier ruggedness and emerging sophistication that characterized the growing town. That night, she dreamed of the melody again, haunting, sweet, just beyond her grasp, and woke with tears on her cheeks and an ache in her heart. The following evening, Lillian arrived at the Silver Dollar shortly before 8. The saloon was more crowded than on her previous visit, with cowboys fresh off the range, railroad workers ending their shifts, and local businessmen seeking refreshment. She found a small table near the back, ordering tea when the barmaid came around. At precisely 8 o'clock, Adam Hayes entered, guitar case in hand. He nodded to several patrons, exchanged words with the bartender, and set up in a corner near the piano. His eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly when they found Lillian before moving on. He tuned his instrument with practiced ease, then began to play. His voice, rich and resonant, filled the space with a song about cattle drives and lonely nights under the stars. The rowdy crowd quieted somewhat, caught by the authenticity in his delivery. Lillian listened intently, waiting for some spark of recognition, but the first song stirred nothing in her memory. Nor did the second or third. She began to wonder if she had misinterpreted the letter entirely. Then Adam shifted his position slightly, looking directly at her as he began a new melody. The opening notes sent a shiver down her spine. Something about the tune reached deeper, touching a place she hadn't known existed. She leaned forward, heart racing as he began to sing. "In a valley green with promise, where the wild roses grow, I built a home for my darling so many years ago." The room around Lillian seemed to fade. Images flashed through her mind: a small cabin surrounded by wildflowers, mountains in the distance, a vegetable garden with neat rows, the smell of bread baking. Laughter. Her hands began to tremble. Adam's eyes never left hers as he continued, his voice softer now. "The winter winds blow colder when you're facing them alone, and spring brings little comfort to a heart turned to stone." A tear slid down Lillian's cheek, followed by another. The memories came faster now, a wedding dance under lantern light. Adam twirling her until she was breathless with laughter, the same song playing. He reached the chorus, and without conscious thought, Lillian found herself mouthing the words along with him. Time may change the mountains, rivers seek another course, but my love remains unbroken, steady as the North Star's force. The final notes faded, and Lillian realized she was openly weeping. Around her, the saloon had grown unusually quiet, patrons watching with a mixture of curiosity and discomfort at the spectacle of a woman in tears. Adam set his guitar aside and crossed to her table. "I think we should continue this conversation elsewhere," he said quietly, offering his hand. Lillian allowed him to lead her outside into the cool night air. They walked in silence for several minutes, moving away from the busy saloon toward a small park at the edge of town. "That song," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know it, I know the words." "You should," he replied softly. "You wrote them, at least the chorus." Lillian stopped walking, turning to face him fully in the moonlight. "Who am I to you, Adam Hayes? What aren't you telling me?" He took a deep breath, seeming to measure his words. "5 years ago you were Lillian Hayes, my wife." The world tilted beneath her feet. "Your wife," she whispered. "We had a small ranch in the Medicine Bow Mountains. We were happy." His voice caught. "Until the raid. Renegades, not Indian, white men pretending to be. They attacked our place while I was in town, burned everything when I got back." He swallowed hard. "I found 2 dead raiders shot with our rifle, but you were gone. No body, no trail, just gone." Lillian pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to sort through the fragments suddenly flooding her mind. "I remember smoke, running, a horse." "I searched for months," Adam continued. "Followed every lead, every rumor. Nothing. Eventually, I had to accept that you were probably dead. I sold what was left of our land and moved here to start over." "But I was in Chicago," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "How did I get there? And why didn't I remember you? I don't know. But when I saw you yesterday, I knew it was you. Older, changed, but my Lily." He reached out hesitantly, his fingers brushing her cheek. "I didn't say anything at first because I couldn't believe it. And I was afraid you'd run again if I claimed to be your husband when you had no memory of me." Lillian closed her eyes at his touch, another memory surfacing, his hand, gentle against her face in the soft light of a cabin evening. "The letter," she said suddenly. "If you didn't send it, who did?" "I have an idea about that," Adam replied. "Come with me tomorrow. There's someone you should meet." "Will you tell me more tonight, about us, about who I was?" He nodded, offering his arm. "Let's walk. It's a long story." As they strolled through the quiet streets of Cheyenne, Adam spoke of their life together, how they had met in 1870 when Lillian, newly arrived from Boston, had taken a position teaching at the small school near the growing settlement of Laramie. How Adam, having returned from the war and drifted west seeking purpose, had been smitten the first time he saw her disciplining a rowdy student with firm kindness. Their courtship had been swift, marriage following within 6 months, and they had built a life together on a small but promising cattle ranch. "You loved it there," he said. "You started a garden, planted trees that wouldn't bear fruit for years. You had faith in the future." With each word, more fragments of memory aligned in Lillian's mind, the smell of pine trees around their cabin, the way the mountains turned purple at sunset, Adam teaching her to shoot the rifle, just in case, the song they had written together during the first winter blizzard when they were snowbound for a week. "We were happy," she said, the realization both joyous and painful. "Truly happy." "Yes," he agreed simply. "We were. And then I lost it all, lost you." Her voice broke. "How can that happen? How can a person forget everything that matters?" Adam guided her to a bench beneath a cottonwood tree. The doctor who treated my leg during the war spoke of soldiers who forgot battles, forgot their own names sometimes, after particularly terrible experiences. The mind protects itself the only way it knows how. Lillian tried to remember the raid, but that memory remained stubbornly dark. What happened that day, the day I disappeared? Adam's face tightened with old grief. I'd gone to Laramie for supplies. You stayed behind. When I returned, the cabin was burning. 2 men lay dead in the yard. You defended yourself, just as I taught you, but the house. There was so much blood inside. He took a shuddering breath. I thought they'd taken your body. It happens sometimes, raiders leaving no one to identify them. But I got away somehow. You must have, though how you ended up in Chicago. I was found by the roadside, unconscious. No identification, just the clothes I wore. She frowned, trying to force the memory. I had injuries, a head wound, broken ribs. They thought I'd been thrown from a horse or a wagon. They sat in silence for a long moment, absorbing the magnitude of what they had lost and found. The song, Lillian finally said. That's how you decided to tell me. A small smile touched Adam's lips. It was our song, the one we wrote together that winter. If anything would bring you back to me, I thought it might be that. And it did. She reached for his hand, feeling both strange and familiar touching him. Part of me knew you, even when my mind didn't remember. Will you come with me tomorrow? There's someone who can help fill in the missing pieces, I think. Yes, she said without hesitation. I need to understand what happened. They parted at the hotel, Adam reluctant to leave her but mindful of propriety. I'll come for you at 9, he said. We have a bit of a ride ahead. Lillian barely slept that night, her dreams a kaleidoscope of memories, some clear, others still fragmentary. She recalled their wedding day, Adam handsome in his one good suit, her dress adorned with wildflowers. She remembered learning to ride, to shoot, to make soap from ashes and fat. She remembered Adam's laugh, the feel of his arms around her in the night, the plans they'd made for children once the ranch was more established. But the raid remained shrouded in darkness, and the 5 years since her journey to Chicago, her life there felt like another woman's story. Morning came with golden light streaming through her window. Lillian dressed carefully in her traveling clothes, then sat down to write in her journal, trying to capture the tumult of emotions and memories before they slipped away again. At precisely 9, a knock came at her door. Mrs. Holloway stood there, eyebrows raised. There's a Mr. Hayes asking for you downstairs. Says you're expected. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. I'll be right down. The proprietress hesitated. Miss Taylor, I don't mean to pry, but a woman alone must be careful of her reputation. Lillian smiled, feeling a strange new confidence. I appreciate your concern, but Mr. Hayes is my husband. We've been separated by circumstance, not choice. She left Mrs. Holloway staring after her in astonishment and descended the stairs to where Adam waited. He wore a clean shirt under his riding coat, his hat in his hands. The sight of him now familiar in a way that went beyond their recent meetings sent a warm flutter through her chest. Good morning, she said. Lily. His eyes took her in, relief evident in his expression, as if he'd feared she might have vanished again in the night. You look well. Are you ready for a ride? Yes, though I'm afraid I don't have riding clothes. I've arranged for a buggy, more comfortable for talking anyway. They drove north out of Cheyenne, following a well-traveled road that paralleled the railroad tracks before veering east into rolling grasslands. Adam pointed out landmarks along the way, filling in the geography of her lost years. The mountains visible on the western horizon were where they had made their home, he explained, though their ranch had been on the eastern slopes in a sheltered valley. Where are we going? She asked after they had been traveling for nearly an hour. To see Samuel Blackfeather. He's half Cheyenne, half white, a scout for the army for many years. He's retired now, has a small place about 3 miles ahead. And you think he knows something about what happened to me? Adam nodded. 2 months ago, he came to me with a strange story. Said he'd been in Chicago and had seen a woman who looked exactly like my wife buying fabric in a shop. I told him he was mistaken, that you were dead, but he insisted. A rueful smile crossed his face. Sam's stubborn that way. He sent the letter, Lillian realized, without telling me. He said if he was wrong, no harm done, but if he was right. Adam glanced at her. Well, here you are. They crested a low rise, and a small homestead came into view, a sturdy cabin with a barn and corral, a vegetable garden protected by a stone wall, a stream nearby providing water. A figure stood waiting in the dooryard, as if expecting them. Samuel Blackfeather was a tall man with graying hair worn in a single braid down his back. His features spoke of his mixed heritage, but his eyes, sharp and observant, struck Lillian immediately. She had seen those eyes before. "You've brought her," he said as Adam helped Lillian down from the buggy. "Good. Sam, this is Lillian, my wife." The older man studied her face intently, then nodded in satisfaction. "I knew it was you in that Chicago shop. A man doesn't forget the face of a woman he saved from death." Lillian's breath caught. You found me. After the raid." "Come inside," Sam said. "This is a story best told sitting down." The cabin's interior was spare but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, handmade furniture, and shelves lined with books, an unexpected sight that made Lillian revise her initial impression of their host. He gestured them to seats at a rough-hewn table and poured coffee from a pot keeping warm on the hearth. "I was tracking those raiders," he began without preamble. "Bad men, deserters, outlaws, the kind who'd kill for the coins in your pocket. They'd hit 3 homesteads already. I was too late to save your place, but I got there maybe an hour after they left." Adam leaned forward. "I never knew you were there. I found only the aftermath. You'd already gone for help by the time I arrived. I followed signs of struggle into the trees behind your cabin. Found blood on the ground, on the brush, then I found her." He nodded toward Lillian. "Unconscious, badly hurt but alive, hidden in a thicket where she'd crawled to escape." Fragments of memory stirred in Lillian's mind: pain, fear, the metallic taste of blood, dragging herself away from danger. "I did what I could for her wounds, but she needed a doctor," Sam continued. "The raiders were heading east. I knew they'd be watching the trail back to Laramie, so I couldn't risk taking her there." "So you took her east," Adam said, understanding dawning on his face. Sam nodded. "I had a brother in North Platte. Thought I could get her to the doctor there, but she took a fever on the trail, delirium. By the time we reached the railroad, she didn't know her own name." "I don't remember any of this," Lillian said softly. "You wouldn't. Head wounds are tricky things. My brother's wife was traveling to Chicago to visit family. She agreed to take you with her, get you to a proper hospital." He sipped his coffee. "When I returned, Adam had already sold the ranch and moved on. People said he'd gone north to Montana Territory. By the time I learned he was actually in Cheyenne, months had passed. And you had no way of knowing if I had survived," Lillian realized. "No. Not until I happened to be in Chicago last spring on tribal business with the government. Saw you coming out of a dry goods store, clear as day. Couldn't believe my eyes." Adam's hand found Lillian's under the table, squeezing gently. "Why didn't you tell me before sending that letter, Sam?" The older man shrugged. "Wasn't sure she'd want to be found. She'd made a new life, and you'd finally stopped looking like a ghost yourself." He turned to Lillian. "But I figured you had a right to know who you were if you wanted to." "Thank you," she said fervently. "You saved my life twice, once from death and once from forgetting." They stayed for several hours, Sam filling in what details he could about the raid and her rescue. As he spoke, more fragments of memory surfaced, hiding in the root cellar when the men first arrived, emerging with the rifle when she heard them planning to burn the cabin, the desperate fight that followed. They thought the place was empty, Sam explained. We're looking for valuables when you surprised them. You shot two before the third got to you. There was a third raider, Adam asked sharply. I only found two bodies. The third is the one who attacked her, tried to silence her when she started shooting. He ran when he heard me coming. I tracked him for a while but lost his trail in a thunderstorm. Adam's face darkened. So he got away. Not exactly, Sam said. Justice comes in many forms. I heard later he tried to rob a stagecoach near Fort Laramie, got himself shot by the guard. As afternoon stretched toward evening, they prepared to leave. Sam walked them to the buggy, his expression thoughtful. Memory is a strange thing, he told Lillian. Some of it may never come back, but the important parts, they're still there, even when you can't see them. He touched his chest. In here. On the drive back to Cheyenne, they were mostly quiet, each absorbed in their own thoughts. The revelations of the day had answered many questions, but new ones had emerged. What would happen now? Could they reclaim what had been lost? Where do we go from here? Lillian finally asked as the lights of Cheyenne appeared in the distance. Adam glanced at her, uncertainty in his expression. That's for you to decide, Lily. You have a life in Chicago. Friends, work. I won't presume that you want to step back into a marriage you don't fully remember. But I do remember, Adam. Not everything, not yet, but enough to know what we had was real. She hesitated. What about you? In 5 years, have you? Is there someone else in your life now? No. His response was immediate. I never stopped loving you, Lily. Even when I thought you were gone forever. The simple declaration brought tears to her eyes. I think I never stopped loving you either. Even when I didn't know your name, there was always this emptiness, this sense that part of me was missing. She took a deep breath. I want to try, Adam. I want to remember the rest. I want to see if we can build something new from what remains. The relief on his face was palpable. We can take it slowly, get to know each other again. I'd like that. They reached Cheyenne as evening fell. Adam saw her to the hotel door, reluctant to part. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow? He asked. There's a decent restaurant on Capitol Avenue. We could talk more, make some plans. Yes, she agreed. But tonight, would you? Would you play our song for me again? I want to remember all the words, he smiled. I'll fetch my guitar from the livery where I left my things. Meet me in the hotel parlor in half an hour. Mrs. Holloway raised no objection when Adam returned and Lillian asked to use the parlor. The proprietress had undergone a remarkable change of attitude upon learning of their situation, her initial disapproval transforming into romantic sympathy. In the quiet room, with only a small lamp burning, Adam played their song again. This time, Lillian hummed along at first, then began to sing softly as more of the lyrics returned to her. The melody bridged the years between them, healing something that had been broken inside her. Over the following days, they spent every available moment together. Adam showed her his small ranch north of town, where he raised horses rather than cattle now. They rode across the rolling grasslands, and Lillian discovered she remembered how to sit a horse as if she'd never forgotten. They shared meals and memories, Adam patiently filling in the gaps in her recollection, never pushing when she struggled to remember. Sometimes, the memories came in overwhelming floods, making love in a meadow of wildflowers, nursing Adam through a terrible fever one winter, the plans they'd drawn for expanding their cabin when children came. Other times, they emerged as gentle ripples, the scent of coffee brewing over a morning fire, the way Adam always kissed her forehead before leaving for work. the book of poetry he'd given her on their first anniversary. A week after their reunion, Adam took her to visit the site of their former home. Little remained, just the stone foundation of the cabin, partially reclaimed by nature, and the twisted metal of the cook stove. Yet standing there in the valley ringed by distant mountains, Lillian felt a profound sense of homecoming. "We were happy here," she said, not a question this time but a certainty. "We were, and we could be happy again, Lily, if you want to try." She turned to face him fully. "I do want that. I want to come home, Adam. Not here," she gestured at the ruins of their cabin, "but wherever you are now. That's home." 2 days later, Lillian sent a letter to her employer and landlady in Chicago, explaining the extraordinary circumstances and her decision not to return. She asked that her few belongings be donated to other women in the boarding house who might need them. Her old life was officially closed. That same evening in the hotel parlor, Adam dropped to one knee before her. "Lillian Taylor Hayes," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I lost you once, and it nearly destroyed me. I never want to be parted from you again." He held out a small box containing a ring, a simple gold band with a tiny pearl. "This isn't the original that was lost in the fire. But my promise remains the same. Will you be my wife again? Will you renew our vows and start our life together anew?" Tears filled her eyes. "Yes, Adam. Yes, with all my heart." They were married for the second time on a bright October morning in Cheyenne's small church. Mrs. Holloway attended as Lillian's witness, beaming with approval, while Samuel Blackfeather stood beside Adam. The ceremony was brief but deeply moving, the minister adding a special blessing for those whom God has reunited against all odds. Afterward, they returned to Adam's ranch, now their ranch, to begin their new life together. The house was smaller than their original cabin but solidly built, with 2 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and windows that caught the morning sun. Adam had prepared it carefully for her arrival, adding curtains, a braided rug, and bookshelves stocked with volumes he remembered she had enjoyed. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Lillian felt the last pieces of her memory sliding into place, not with dramatic revelation but with gentle certainty, like puzzle pieces finding their proper alignment. "I remember everything now," she whispered against Adam's shoulder. "The good and the bad, all of it." He pulled her closer. "Does it change anything? How you feel about being here?" "No," she said firmly. "It only makes me more certain. This is where I belong, Adam, with you." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow before Thanksgiving. They spent the long evenings by the fire, Adam playing his guitar while Lillian worked on plans for expanding the garden come spring. Sometimes they sang together, their voices blending in harmony on the song that had brought them back together. In December, Lillian received a package from Chicago, her journals from the lost years, sent by her former landlady. Reading through them was like glimpsing an alternate life, one lived by a shadow version of herself. She recognized the loneliness in those pages, the constant sense of something missing. "I was looking for you," she told Adam as she closed the final volume. "Even when I didn't know you existed, I was searching." "And I was waiting," he replied, "even when I'd given up hope." As winter deepened, Lillian discovered she was carrying their child conceived, they calculated, within weeks of their reunion. The news brought a joy that seemed to radiate from them both, warming even the coldest January days. "Boy or girl doesn't matter," Adam said, his hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "Just healthy and happy." "And loved," Lillian added. "So very loved." In March, a letter arrived from Samuel Blackfeather. The third raider, the one who had attacked Lillian and left her for dead, had not actually died from his stagecoach injuries as previously reported. He had been captured, tried, and was now serving a 20-year sentence in the territorial prison. The news brought an unexpected sense of closure. Justice, delayed but not denied, spring arrived with a rush of green across the prairie. Lillian's garden took shape: vegetables, herbs, and flowers bordering the path to the house. Adam added a porch swing where they could sit in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple. Their son, Benjamin Samuel Hayes, was born on a warm night in August 1880, nearly a year after Lillian had stepped off the train in Cheyenne, searching for answers. He had his father's storm-gray eyes and his mother's determined chin, and from his first breath, he was surrounded by a love that had endured separation, amnesia, and years of loss. "He's perfect," Adam whispered, cradling the newborn while Lillian rested. "Absolutely perfect." "He's our new beginning," she replied, reaching for her husband's hand. As Benjamin grew, so did the ranch. Adam's knack for horseflesh brought buyers from as far away as Denver and Salt Lake City. Lillian started a small school in one room of their expanded house, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers alongside her own son. By the time Benjamin was 5, he had a sister, Charlotte Lillian, with another sibling on the way. Their home echoed with laughter, music, and the everyday sounds of a family thriving. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the children were asleep, Adam would bring out his guitar and play their song. Lillian would join him, their voices twining together in the melody that had bridged the chasm of their lost years. "You ever regret it?" Adam asked her one such night as they sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. Coming to Cheyenne on nothing but a mysterious letter, taking a chance on memories you weren't sure were real. Lillian leaned her head against his shoulder, her hand resting on the gentle swell of her pregnancy. "Never, not for a single moment." She smiled up at him. "Some songs are worth remembering, no matter how long it takes to recall the tune." Adam's arm tightened around her shoulders. "Sing it with me again." And as the stars appeared one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, they sang their song not of loss and separation, but of love enduring against all odds, as steady and true as the North Star guiding travelers home. 10 years later, on a crisp autumn day much like the one when Lillian had first arrived in Cheyenne, they celebrated their anniversary with a gathering of friends and family. Samuel Blackfeather, now stooped with age but still sharp-eyed, presented them with a handcrafted wooden box inlaid with symbols of unity and endurance. "For your memories," he said, "the old ones and the new." That night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Lillian and Adam sat at their kitchen table with the box between them. Inside, they placed mementos of their journey: the mysterious letter that had brought Lillian to Wyoming, a pressed wildflower from the site of their first home, a lock of Benjamin's baby hair, the small notebook where Adam had written the lyrics to their song. "I've been thinking," Lillian said as they closed the box, "about how close we came to never finding each other again." Adam reached across the table for her hand. "But we did find each other, against all odds." "Yes." She squeezed his fingers, feeling the strength and familiarity of his touch. "And that's the real miracle, isn't it? Not that I remembered our song, but that you were there to hum it when I needed it most." In the quiet house, with the Wyoming wind singing softly around the eaves, Adam began to hum their melody once more. Lillian joined in, her voice blending with his as it had countless times before. The song that had once made her cry with the pain of remembrance now brought only joy: the joy of a journey completed, a family restored, and a love that had proven stronger than time, distance, or even the fragility of memory itself. And as the last notes faded into the night, Lillian looked into the eyes of the man who had twice become her husband and knew with absolute certainty that no matter what challenges the future might hold, their song would continue, passed down to their children, and beyond a legacy of love reclaimed against impossible odds in the vast, unforgiving, beautiful wilderness of the American frontier.